the last video, we talked about why you should move to Japan, but that was only the first half. For every action, there is a reaction, and for every light side, there is a dark side. So in this video, let's talk about some reasons why you might not actually want to move and live here, aka reasons why I don't love life in Japan. Number one point is pretty much atarimae.
You see what I did there?
We all know Japanese is one of the most difficult languages to learn and use, not just for foreigners, but even for us natives. So if you're thinking of moving here, there's absolutely no question that you'll experience some sort of difficulty. Sure, these days we've got all of these advanced digital translators
It can get you through a lot.
but I imagine if you're
Constantly having to fidget around with those things and use them.
it can get kind of annoying. And there are just some scenarios which just don't translate as easily, even for an amateur human translator. For example, recently I had to go to the hospital for a foreigner, and it was really difficult for me to translate the symptoms from English to Japanese,
And then retranslating the doctor's explanations from Japanese to English.
so I was sat there doing my best to translate, but I ended up having to use my phone, which number one is not efficient, and number two, it
Don't look good for me.
Now, Japan has really been making the effort to make it more foreigner friendly with all these tourists coming in, but that's only the surface level stuff. As with most other languages, Japanese has a lot of deeper levels of communication with things like honne and tatemae, which I won't explain here, but basically imagine if a Japanese tourist went to the UK and some British person started speaking sarcastically.
That's gonna end well, innit?
So if you're actually gonna move and live in Japan, I encourage you to
Please.
at least learn a bit of Japanese.
You don't have to be fluent, but just try.
Matter of fact, if you want to have private Japanese lessons, I can teach you. And I'm not kidding, I do actually teach students online. So if you're interested,
Let me know.
that was a pretty good plug for my lessons, not gonna lie. How do I say where is the closest convenience store in Japanese?
In Japanese, where's the closest convenience store is?
一番近いコンビニはどこですか?
Okay, and then how do I say how much do these potato chips cost?
In Japanese, how much do potato chips cost is?
ポテトチップスはいくらですか?
Okay, and then how do I say oops, I don't have enough money?
In Japanese, oops, I don't have enough money is.
おっと、お金が足りません。
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but oh, by the way, don't worry, I paid for these with my own money, and these are really good. Here's a question for you. How big is your home? I'm sorry, that was a really private question for me to ask, but it's important because when you move to Japan,
You'll probably end up somewhere a fraction of the size.
if your answer to that question was small, well then you're in luck because you'll fit right into the millions of tiny homes which Japan provides. But if your answer to that question was closer to mansion, well then, you're in for a treat because when I say mansion in Japan, I don't mean something like this. I mean something like this.
Hold on, pause for a second. I don't get it. Who in Japanese history is responsible for taking the English word mansion and completely changing the definition to the opposite thing? Seriously, when I first moved to Japan as a teenager, I was so excited because I was like, yay, we're moving to a mansion. No. I was like that meme where the monkey's like, oh no, when I realized that mansion doesn't mean what it actually means. I don't get it. Why does Japanese have all these foreign words like toire, restaurant, computer, camera, but then here comes mansion, which means the complete opposite thing. What a lie.
Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. It's been bugging me for over a decade. Anyways, yeah, Japanese accommodation is gonna be small, but you're gonna have to just get used to it. I don't mind it, of course, because I'm Japanese and I'm used to it, but because most of my homes in the past have been pretty small, including my UK university accommodation.
Matter of fact,
Where I live now is probably the biggest home I've had in recent years. Whoa! How did you teleport like that? Look, trust me, my room is a lot bigger than it looks right here, okay?
More importantly, could you please go back to where you belong? Right there. Thank you. Go back. Go.
If anything, I think it'll be a good experience for you to move into a smaller space because number one, it'll encourage you to be a minimalist, and number two, it should improve your organizational skills because you'll need to pack things up neatly if you want to fit everything. But yeah, mansion. I wish.
actually, I don't want to live in a mansion, no.
We all need money to survive, and in order to make money, we all need to work. And in order to work, we all need a job. And moving to Japan just for the sake of moving to Japan is not going to end well when it comes to finding and maintaining a job. Unfortunately for both of us, the traditional method of applying to jobs, especially for traditional Japanese companies, is not going to be easy unless number 1, you speak very good Japanese, and or number 2, you're talented in a specific skill. And I don't have either. Instead, I would recommend going down 4 alternative paths to make your life slightly easier. Number 1, work expat. Number 2, direct connections and network. Number 3, seasonal work. And number 4, English teacher.
You knew I was gonna say that.
I won't go into too much detail about these options right now, and that's gonna be a topic for another video.
Great, so now we've got a job. We've completed the first level successfully. But then the next level is trying to keep that job. Not from the boss, but from our sanity. I think it's pretty well established that traditional Japanese work-life balance isn't great.
And then comes the pay.
Whatever your paycheck says, do not even try to calculate it in your home currency because, as we all know, at the moment, the Japanese yen is not doing great.
It's crazy, I was just looking at the British pound to yen conversion rate and I am in shock.
It's crazy, think about it. If you buy 2 toilet rolls in Japan, it's only gonna be worth 1 toilet roll in the UK. Wait, what kind of analogy is that? Why toilet paper? It's because I want to go to the toilet, that's why. Anyways, I'm over here complaining about money and everything, but did you know there's a new digital nomad visa that was announced in Japan? And if that is your entry ticket to Japan, well then, all these problems will be like the
Biggest skippable ad in the history of the World Wide Web.
Again, what kind of analogy? Does that even make sense? Big, what? Skippable? You get what I'm trying to say. I already talked about this briefly in the previous video, but the biggest challenge of moving to Japan as a foreigner is the challenge of trying to fit into the local community. From the moment you arrive in Japan to the moment you feel like you're getting the hang of things, you'll realize that number 1, most people will look different to you, and number 2, most people will treat you different. And when I say most people, I mean the 90-something% of the population that are 100% Japanese, including me. But actually not including me. The thing is, just a few years ago, that's how it would have ended. You just would have had to get used to it, that's what I would have said. But now, thanks to the insane influx of tourists, digital nomads and work expats, I feel like no longer will you feel alone, and actually you'll feel like you belong because of all of these foreigners and because of all the people like you. And on top of that, I feel like there's been a big growth in the international student population, which I mentioned last time. So these are people like me, Japanese people who only went to international schools and or lived abroad, so we actually speak English no problem.
And in fact, we prefer hanging out with foreigners rather than the local Japanese people.
We know that times are changing and we encourage foreigners to come into Japan and make it a more international society. But the only thing is,
Please.
Don't wreak havoc. Please don't bring chaos. Please. Wow. Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking, how poetic. We ended the last video about
Positive things in a slightly
negative tone, but then we finished this video about negative things in a slightly
positive tone.
This wasn't really intentional, by the way. I was just writing the script, and then this is how it turned out. So now you've heard the full picture of my opinions on what the advantages and disadvantages are of living in Japan.
Things are now balanced, as all things should be.
But I do hope that these 2 videos have at least been somewhat insightful if you are actually considering moving and living here. But at the end of the day, it's up to your personal circumstances and your final decision which will decide your fate. Let's just hope AI doesn't break your canon event. In case you haven't seen my previous video where I do talk about the positive things about Japan, please do click here. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you soon in the future. Bye bye. Toilet. Ramen 食べ過ぎて